13 and out as the Blues shut down the Power. The Cats soar to a huge win over the Bombers, and Greater Western Sydney takes another giant leap towards September. This is the round so far, brought to you by AAMI. This is the round so far, brought to you by AAMI. I'm Riley Beveridge. This is Kane Cornes. Kane, it's been a massive weekend of footy. We'll start at Marvel Stadium, where Carlton snapped Port Adelaide's 13-match winning streak.
Oh, and didn't they do it in impressive fashion? There is the final siren. The Blues getting it done by 50 points. They've won 4 in a row. They've got West Coast next week. They sit in 9th position, and the lid is starting to come off. But that was a really impressive performance across all facets of the game.
It certainly was. As you mentioned, 4 straight wins from Carlton by margins of 59, 60, 53 and 50 today against Port Adelaide. They moved the ball so much better going inside 50.
Yeah, didn't they? So 32 scoring shots that they had, and what I'm noticing here is the deep entries that they were able to get. So where they launched the ball was from really damaging positions, and that was on the back of their pressure to cause turnover, and then they got some speed on the ball, speed of ball movement, leg speed, brought the ball to ground from some significant contests in their forward line. They weren't outmarked. You can see it here. Watch the ball drop softly to the surface there, and then the pressure that they were able to apply. This tackle from Fogarty was synonymous of the game today. Pick it up at ground level. Their forwards were electric. 4 goals from Silvani we'll get to. 4 goals in the first half from Motlop. Really didn't have much from Curnow in the first half, and Mackay got injured. So the different avenues that they had to goal today was something that really stood out. I thought they were really strong from stoppage, as they usually are, but off the turnover, they really hurt Port Adelaide today.
They came into the game with a few injuries. It was their role players that stood up, none more so than Jack Silvani. He is our Saturday star. 19 disposals, 10 hit-outs, a career-high 4 goals as well.
Well, all the talk coming in was how are Port Adelaide with Jonas and Aliir going to compete with Curnow and Mackay? Well, Mackay got injured early. Curnow was well held, and it was that man that lit the fuse for them. A couple of goals in the first half. Then he went deep. Didn't matter the matchup that he had, but he looked like a really dangerous forward all day. And a lot of them, 3 of his goals, you can see, were off the ground. And that was reflective of a lot of Carlton's damage in their forward 50. The defensive pressure has always been there. So it was just good for him to have a career game. Like, career best 4 goals today. He was able to finish his work off. The crowd love him, his teammates love him, and he's such an important emotional figure for the group.
Out of contract at the end of the year as well, so it's going to be a big watch there. As you mentioned a couple of times there, Kane, Harry Mackay coming from the ground early in this game with a knee injury, landed really awkwardly on this right knee. Now, he was laughing and joking after the match. Michael Voss saying that he didn't think it was too serious, but spent a lot of the game off the ground.
Yeah, it looked serious initially, but they would know straight away. So doctors, they're about 98% on the ACL. As soon as they test it, they'll get it scanned. But you could see by the body language, by Michael Voss's words, that it's not going to be season-ending. I wouldn't think. He may miss next week. He certainly looked a bit ginger and a bit proppy, but precautionary to sub him out, and I don't think it's too serious, fingers crossed.
Another massive upset today was at the Adelaide Oval, where Greater Western Sydney overcame the Crows. They've won 5 straight now, the Giants. They are well and truly in the finals mix.
Oh, they are. What about this last quarter? So they're 17 points down at 3-quarter time. They win by 14 points. They kick 5 goals to none in the last quarter. All different avenues to goal and different personnel. Toby Green, you saw. I mean, he had some big moments, 3 goals. Toby Green wasn't his biggest day. Kelly got on the end of that one, fought through a tag from Keys and a bit of Jones. Jesse Hogan is able to hand this one off, and look at this. He just flushed this Himmelberg from outside 50, and it was all the Giants in the last quarter. The way that this group has been able to defend this year has been extraordinary. So 13 entries Adelaide had in the last quarter for 1 point. And that has been, it's been a bit of the story for the year. The Giants concede a lot of entries, but they defend it so well. And we'll get to the part of the reason why shortly. But there's Lloyd just putting the full stop on it with under a minute to go. And their record against Adelaide, they won in round 1. They had a big win on Adelaide Oval last year. Interstate, they travel really well. And I think what they've done on the back of last year winning 6 and sacking a coach to where they are now on the cusp of playing finals has been significant.
Adam Kingsley has done a fantastic job there at the Giants. You referenced him before, but Sam Taylor has been absolutely superb down back for GWS this year. He'd be just about an All-Australian form if it wasn't for that hamstring injury earlier in the campaign. He had 16 intercepts.
Yeah, he was challenged early. So Walker kicked 2 first-half goals. You thought this is going to be a terrific battle. Taylor Walker did not touch the ball in the second half. And this guy, not only did he limit Walker, who is in the running for the Coleman Medal and All-Australian, he had 21 touches himself, 5 intercept marks were showing a lot there, and he limited Walker to 0. So when Adelaide were looking for someone to stand up, their forwards went missing, Fogarty went missing, Thilthorpe went missing, Rankin was nowhere to be seen, Walker was nowhere to be seen in the second half, didn't touch the footy. So I think the last 2 weeks says sort of all we need to know about Adelaide. They're on a nice track in year 4 of a rebuild, but they're not a serious football team. They're not a serious contender in terms of winning a final or even making it this year. And the last 2 weeks has been bitterly disappointing. And 14 points up, three-quarter time at home, big crowd, big expectations, and to be held goalless in the last quarter. Geez, Matthew Nicks will be scratching his head tonight.
Their next 4 is quite difficult as well over the next month. Adelaide, they've got Melbourne at the MCG, then the Showdown, Gold Coast at home, and they finish with Brisbane at the Gabba. They haven't won consecutive games since round 5 and 6, so it only gets more difficult for the Crows. Let's get to GMHBA Stadium now, where Geelong absolutely thrashed Essendon. It was 7-5-47 to 1 behind at quarter time.
Yeah, what about this for a first quarter? So, yeah, as you mentioned the score, but only the 3rd scoreless quarter for Essendon this season. And there's been so much positivity over the Bombers and what they did last week, and we've all lauded Brad Scott and the impact that he has had and their leaders and the fact that they've stood up. So it is a young, inexperienced group that perhaps can't handle that expectation. Now, not many are going to go here and win. In fact, not many in the last 20 years have gone there and won. But when the game is over halfway through the first quarter, that's pretty alarming, and it's reflective of where Essendon sit in and amongst the competition. And on the flip side to that, it says to me, Geelong can win the premiership. That they can win the premiership. They are building really nicely into this season. They've had their challenges personnel-wise, but there's a belief in the group like no other team in the league. And even after the game, Chris Scott says we're near our best. And when we're at our best, we can beat anyone. He said the same or words to that effect after last week's win. So the confidence that he instills in the group with a good sort of stretch coming at home against some good sides, they're going to be tested, but Collingwood are clearly the best side in it. It's hard to say that Geelong aren't the second best and building.
You've been big on the Cats all season. The Bombers should have known what was coming because this is their last 3 meetings with Geelong. 60-13, 38-0, and then 49-2
It's
today.
embarrassing, isn't it? Like the run-ons that they concede against Geelong, and once again, Hawkins kicked 8 earlier on in the year. We'll get to Tom Hawkins with his performance tonight.
Tom Hawkins was fantastic, as you mentioned there, Kane. 5 goals tonight. He's now got 27 in his last 5 games against the Bombers.
Yeah, he's building, isn't he? 45, is he, on the Coleman? So only six behind. And that is getting a little bit tighter with Taylor Walker just with the 2 goals. Danaher's in the mix as well. But, yeah, he's got his speed back. So I've always really admired his first 3 or 4 steps on the lead. He's a big man, but he's really quick and powerful on the lead. So he got that back. We know what a good set shot he is, how quickly he read that. Cameron was well held, kicked the 1 goal tonight and was a bit inaccurate, but it was this man on the lead and exposed Essendon's lack of height in defence. Laverde was injured. You saw Wiedemann have to go back there, but Zirk Thatcher, the second time this year, has got a hold of him. So for the Bombers, clearly there's personnel issues forward of the ball and they couldn't get a winner in their key position players forward, and that was in part due to lack of supply and the lack of entries, but also behind the ball. So you'd expect them to pretty aggressively chase a key defender and perhaps, if they can, a key forward in the trade period.
Milestone game for Brian Myers tonight. I don't think we've ever seen a player or a season like he's having. So have a look at this. He's kicked 4 goals. He's had 30 goal assists compared to 4 goals and then 120 score involvements.
Can you be All-Australian with those numbers? Can you be an All-Australian small forward with 4 goals?
Well, he's making a fair case for it at the moment.
Yeah, and the coach, Chris Scott, spoke after the game. He said you don't like to have favourites, but he's one of his favourites because you see all that and the decisions that he's making and the career that he's built for himself. But what you perhaps don't see is the work rate. And him and Brad Close and the work rate that they provide as small forwards a big reason as to why Geelong's season is well and truly alive.
Let's get to Friday night footy now. It was a top 4 showdown. That's where we'll find our moment of the weekend. And it came with Jake Melksham kicking this goal under a minute on the clock when he booted this one. Now, we'll take you behind the goals in just a sec because it was really interesting, but this is a great moment for Jake Melksham.
Oh, how important was he as well? I think he's just brought an energy, and the forward line has been struggling. They've been struggling to score. That tips them over 100 points. We've all been speaking about Melbourne and their inability to score. They have played in some tough conditions this year, and that is the reason why. But we're highlighting here. So Gunston started on the wing, Riley, and he's gone behind the ball as the spear. Now, it's Langdon that's gone with him.
Langdon followed him the whole way down there. Gunston spent the previous minute and a half pointing for someone else to come down and man up Langdon. So he's meant to be the spare man in defence. Now, if he's the spare man in defence, he's probably where that dangerous area where the ball gets kicked is. But because Langdon followed him the whole way down, the whole time he's pointing at Brisbane to try and get an extra down there to man Langdon to create him being the spare again. And he just couldn't do it.
And I feel like Melbourne are so well drilled in those scenarios. They know what to do when they're chasing a small lead late in games, and they know what to do when they're protecting it. And to me, that says all it needs to say about the best teams. Collingwood are terrific. We know their record in close games. Port Adelaide have won a lot of close games this year. They're well drilled. And for Langdon to know, OK, Gunston's going to go as a spare. I'm going to go make him accountable. So he can't disrupt our forward setup, and he has to come and play on me. So that was genius. Questions over whether Chris Fagan went too defensive with such a long period of time left in the game. That's something on review they'll need to look at. But certainly when Gunston did go back, he was out of position and he had no influence on the contest.
Kane, did you notice the score source of where that Jake Melksham mark came from? It was from a short boundary throw-in where Max Gawn got himself in front. The entire night from boundary throw-ins, Max Gawn was in front of Oscar McInerney. He got body position, he worked his way forward. That's how the goal came.
Yeah, Ruckman don't understand that boundary umpires can't throw it in 30 metres every time. And when they get tired late in the games after they've run 15 kilometres, it drops short. Gawn was in front all the time. And the influence that had on Melbourne's stoppage setup, Oscar McInerney didn't adjust quick enough, and he certainly wasn't physical enough with Max Gawn.
You mentioned whether or not Chris Fagan went too defensive too early in the fourth quarter. There are a number of moments where I think they'd probably look back on and think we didn't get that exactly.
Well, this is just contest. This is just finals footy. Who wants it more? 3-on-1. Melksham takes that mark. Pack mark. Pickett. 2-on-1. Who wants it? Keep your feet. Keep your feet and kick a goal. So Melksham, critical contest. Pickett, critical contest. Look at the score. Look at the time in the game and how important these are. Who wants that? McKenna didn't go hard enough and didn't intercept the ball, didn't stand up in that moment like you need to in finals, kicked it out on the full. Watch where this ball needs to go.
Needs to go right. That's where they're pointing. They've got the extra man right. He kicks it left, straight to Max Gawn.
Straight to Max Gawn. So there's effort levels, there's contest, and there's also dumb decisions being made. And then look at this easy lead-up. That's the only spot that ball could have gone. Brisbane left the leading lane for Melksham, who goes and kicks a left footer. And this is just who wants it more. Viney versus McCluggage. McCluggage's going to slip over. Too easy, pushed off. And then Oscar McInerney, who would have 30 kilos on him, gets the ball ripped out of his hands, and one of the toughest, most tenacious players in the game kicks a goal in a big moment. Melbourne wanted it more, and that is probably one of the reasons that Brisbane's record away from home is so poor.
Big talking point going into this one was Brodie Grundy being dropped to the VFL to find some form as a forward. Max Gawn absolutely dominated as the sole ruckman.
Oh, didn't he? So he turned back the clock, didn't he? So in terms of his numbers, just off the charts, played almost as an extra midfielder. D scored 54 points from stoppage, so that was clearly the influence that Max had, and then to be able to do this, which we've seen in big finals before, but probably haven't seen it as much this year. So it was a real challenge for him. I thought physically he's been labouring this year, and you're wondering about the knee, but he put all those doubts to bed with this performance against a ruckman who was going super well, and their midfield was going really well, Brisbane as well. So, yeah, I guess it was the right move to drop Grundy, and they got the result that they wanted to. But now you've still got Brodie Grundy on a 4.5-year contract. How they manage a ruckman who they made a significant pitch to get him as a ruckman, not as a forward. Now they're asking him to play forward. So it's a challenge for Simon Goodwin and the club on how they manage Brodie Grundy from here.
So this is from the bye. So after the bye, the 3 weeks after the bye, this is all of Max Gawn's averages, and that was on Friday night. So he's ahead in everything, basically.
Yeah, so you're not going to bring Brodie Grundy back in the short period of time. I can't see him getting back in unless Brodie Grundy gets injured, because they're playing him as a forward. Brady Grundy's never been a forward. He will never be a forward, and he's not going to be successful in the AFL team as a forward. He's a ruckman, so now he's got to get his head around being a genuine backup ruckman to Max Gawn.
Brisbane have lost 14 of their last 15 at the MCG now. This is their coach, Chris Fagan, speaking about the record afterwards.
Yeah, probably the hoodoo lives on. Unfortunately, it wasn't that far away from not living on, but it does. So we just have to take that feedback. I'm not a great believer that what happens tonight, if we're good enough to get to finals and we have to play here again, that's going to be on our mind. I think we can deal with that. We were close tonight, as about as close as you can get, but didn't quite get there.
It was a different tone post-game than what it was pre-game. Pre-game, I'm sick of talking about it. I'd like them to embrace it a bit more. Just put your hand up and say, we cannot hide from this record. Clearly, everyone can see it. It is an issue. We'll do everything that we can to get to the bottom of why this is happening. But clearly, next time they play on the MCG, they're going to be asked about it repeatedly in the lead up to the game. They're not going to be able to escape it. I'd love for them to own it, admit it, and try and sort out what is going on, because that was an unlosable game, really, from the position that they were in.
Let's head to Heritage Bank Stadium now, where Gold Coast, under interim coach Stephen King, got the points against St Kilda. There was a couple of less lights that stood up. So Sam Flanders has dealt with form and fitness issues this year. And Rory Atkins, who's gone there on that big contract but hasn't been able to get into the team, they were their two best players.
Yeah, Rory Atkins' best game for ages. He had 32, he had 7 score involvements, massive metres gained, 716. But Flanders is the story. If they found another young one, there was a lot of hype about him in the pre-season and a lot of talk about how he was flying through the pre-season. So finally we're starting to see that come together. I mean, really solid numbers. 33 be a career high for him, 5 clearances, and is a inside-outside midfielder, which is what you like. He reminds me a little bit of Hugh McCluggage, with ability to go in and win it, but does most of his damage on the outside. But it was in the contest where they got it done, wasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly was. I wonder if they had a point to prove a little bit with Stuart Dew being sacked earlier in the week, but every metric, which is, as you said, around the contest, they won today.
Yeah, so many times when they've lost this year, we've put this board up with them losing. And I've said that's their strength. Yeah. Stoppage, contest, row, Anderson, took Millers back into the side. Finally, they delivered on that. You'd be pretty alarmed if you were Ross Lyon and the Saints. Yeah. Like, they were dominated here, but that number there, 58 to 72 in tackles, and some of their walking around stoppage and allowing Gold Coast to follow up and do damage from stoppage, the secondary possession from stoppage, he'd look at on review and think, we just weren't there physically, we didn't work hard enough today. And the Saints have only won 1 out of their last 5, and that was against West Coast. They probably should have lost that. And I've said a few times on this show this year that they're no better than what they were last year, which is a shame, because the club thought they were in a better position when they sacked Brett Ratton with their list than what they delivered last year.
They've scored fewer than 60 points in 3 of their last 4 games. Before we move on, Kane, what do you make of Gold Coast week? Obviously, they made the decision to part ways with Stuart Dew. They'll now spend the off-season trying to find a new permanent coach. Everyone thinks it's Damien Hardwick, and with good reason. But what did you make of the decision?
I thought it was handled incredibly poorly. I mean, the 6 years, you probably can't argue with the record that it was time for change. Now, whether the right thing was at the end of the year more so than this week, but I think the senior leaders and the management of the footy club would look back and go, we let down our coach with the way that we exited him and the way we handled it.
Let's head to the MCG now, where Collingwood got a comfortable victory over Fremantle. This one was created in the second term. They kicked 10 goals to 2 in the second quarter.
It's not dissimilar to the vision that we showed of the Blues, like where they're launching inside, like just from really dangerous spots and getting deep entries and fast ball movement. I mean, just they're a 15% better side than any of the other teams in the league, and it's their ability off turnover and their speed of ball movement, which we've spoken about a lot, and it's no one forward that will get you. Sometimes it's Ash Johnson and will get you. McStay's back in the side. He was quiet. Elliott's been terrific. He's probably the hottest small forward in the league right now, but you'd love that as a forward. Like the speed of ball movement and the ability to get a one-on-one deep inside forward 50. Freo had no answers for that. It was overwhelming. They kicked 105 points off turnover. That's finals footy. That's how you win. And Justin Longmuir scratches his head about what an ordinary year it has been for the Dockers this year.
He would have been scratching his head about some of the entries going inside 50 throughout that first half as well. Darcy Moore had 5 intercept marks in the first quarter alone. They just feasted on this ball.
Yeah, so part of that is complete opposite. Look where they're launching the ball and look how shallow these entries are. You want to kick the ball there to almost a centre-half back position, like right here. That is the absolute sweet spot for Collingwood. Even if they don't mark it, their ground level players, their halfbacks, are so quick to win the one-on-one ground ball inside defensive 50, and then they get their offensive game going. So shallow entries like that, no wonder Moore had a field day like he has had throughout the years. Another one there. Quaynor has really lifted with his intercept game. He's in the All-Australian conversation. He took 3 intercept marks today. They took 17 as a side. So, yeah, Freo and their ball movement has been an issue, not just for a short period of time, it's been an issue for the whole of the year.
Let's head to our AAMI clangers now. Who covers clangers? AAMI does. We'll start at the MCG. I'm not sure if you saw this, but Zach Bailey attempting to have a bounce on the middle of the ground before the game probably set the scene for Brisbane tonight.
I did see that. Didn't affect his form, though. Still had some big moments. Geez, he's a good player, isn't he, Zach Bailey? But bang. So, good player, terrible umpire. Speaking of terrible, this runner
I don't know what was going on here.
Someone's boot, and you just saw, as you're watching the play unfold, a white boot come through the play. You zoom out, and he's chucked it for no reason. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know where he was throwing it. I don't know whose boot it was, but it was a clanger.
And now how about this? Zach Merritt, Uncle Zach Merritt, brings on his nephew before the game in tears, couldn't believe it. His 200th game today, Zach Merritt. How's this? Dating back to 2005, Essendon are now 8-24 in milestone games.
Yeah, not a great record. And that's before the game. Yeah. Imagine his face when he saw the score after.
All right, let's get to the SCG now, where Sydney kept its slim finals hopes alive with victory over the Western Bulldogs. This was an absolute thriller in the last term.
Yeah, no, it was. They stood up. They've lost some close games this year, so it was nice for them to be on the right side of it. And you just had no idea which way it was going to go. Murray Ugle-Hagan takes that. He puts them in front there with a really nice set shot. He wasn't his big game, but he's had a big year. It was Sydney's surge. So after quarter time, the Western Bulldogs had dominated stoppage, they dominated possession, they had probably over-handballed, but Sydney shut that down, and they said, all we're going to do, we are just going to get our forwards to come up really high, and we're going to surge the ball forward. Terrific tackle there from Amadi late in the game, but that was the difference. So this type of stuff, their forwards came up high, they surged it forward, there's the final siren, and in John Longmire's 300th game, it was a really important victory, and there's a lot of answers still to be, or a lot of questions that the Western Bulldogs still need to answer about their form and why they're squandering such a talented list.
This was a shootout between two of the game's best and classiest midfielders for a lot of it. Errol Goulden had 30 disposals and 5 clearances. Bont had 31 disposals and 2 goals. These have got to be the two best ball-using midfielders in the comp.
It was a masterclass. I thought it was a genuine masterclass from both of them. And what they have in common, they're different players, but their ability to follow up from contest to contest, not lose their feet. So that one, Goulden just read that quicker than anyone else. He actually was involved in the first bit, followed up, and you're right, we know about his ball use, but he's played a lot of time on the wing this year and has been really effective. On this night, when they were getting dominated against from stoppage, Goulden went inside. And Bontempelli's just about the most consistent midfielder in the league, does it week after week, and such an inspirational captain. It's a shame that he didn't get more to come with him on the night.
It certainly was. Their entire midfield, there's a few question marks over it, I reckon, Kane. So have a look at this. Throughout the course of the night, they won virtually every midfield category. They lost stoppage scores. Across the course of the year, they ranked 2nd for clearances, 14th for stoppage scores.
So they're not maximising what they've got, and Sydney didn't even go with a ruckman. It was McLean up against the All-Australian, probably ruckman Tim English, who had a big night and a big influence early, Tim English, and their midfielders, I think they over-handball. Yeah. I think they're so handball happy that eventually they handball to someone who's under pressure and they don't get the damage because it's slow from the extra handball. The numbers come back and protect the defence more so than if they just one handball break like Collingwood, fast entry, one-on-one deep inside forward 50. So, but that's something that's been the case, for a long time at the Western Bulldogs.
Let's get to our ladder now, Kane, and this is as tight as it will get, I reckon. So from about Geelong in 5th all the way through to, I don't know who it is, in about 14th, 15th, 16th, you could throw a blanket over them.
Well, there's 4 teams on 36, so the Saints appear incredibly vulnerable. Even the Dogs appear vulnerable. Imagine if they didn't make the 8. The Blues are coming. They'll be inside the 8 next week when they knock off West Coast by about 70 to 80 points. Adelaide, they're looking pretty shaky as well. And the Giants have momentum. They've got Gold Coast to try and make it 6 in a row next week.
It's going to be an interesting finish to the year. It's going to be an interesting finish to round 18 as well. Let's get to our remaining games. It starts at Marvel Stadium tomorrow with North Melbourne.
You excited about these?
I've been more excited. But North Melbourne against Hawthorn at Marvel Stadium, and then West Coast against Richmond at Optus Stadium. Let's skip them.
Yeah,
We'll
let's
get to
move on.
Kane's
Let's move
question.
on.
What are your early thoughts about next week's fixture? Collingwood, Port Adelaide, the big clash, 1v2. Early thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a challenge for Port Adelaide, isn't it, from a personnel point of view. I think they get McKenzie back, which will help, but Darcy Byrne-Jones concussed, so he's out. Don't think Charlie Dixon nor Jason Horne-Francis will get up. So Braden Maynard was really confident after the game. He says, we're the best team in the league. They're going to have to play pretty special to beat us. And I think he's probably spot on.
It's going to be a ripping clash. Can't wait to review all of that with you next week. Thanks for your time today. See you next Saturday night.